Yesterday was December 22nd. Yesterday, I thought about cells, but not as they appear under a microscope. For a moment, I imagined this. What if cells were not only living units, but also thinking, deciding, governing beings? If each cell were an individual, when they came together to form a tissue, would that be a neighborhood? Would organs become cities, and the body function like a state? And the real question was this: would these cells build the same systems we have built? Slavery, for example. Would one cell force another to work for a lifetime simply because it produces more energy? Would they create hierarchies? You multiply, you stop, based on utility? Then I thought about capitalism. Would cells that control energy hoard ATP and put other cells into debt? Would they abandon some to collapse, saying, "You didn't produce enough"? Then came the question of population. When a tissue grows excessively, we call it a tumor. But how would cells see this? Would a cellular state, faced with uncontrolled growth, say, "This is now a disease," and generate an immune response from within? Or would it glorify growth and eventually consume itself? I thought about viruses, single-legged beings, entities that enter the system, use it, but do not belong to it. Would a cellular society see a virus as foreign? Or would it say, different, but maybe useful, and make room for it? The immune system is actually very strict. It doesn't negotiate. It isn't persuaded. If it doesn't recognize something, it destroys it. Humans do the opposite. Sometimes we let in what harms us, get used to it, normalize it, and then we call that order. Yesterday, I realized this: cells are not more compassionate than us, but they are more honest. They do what is necessary to survive. They don't produce ideology. They don't write stories. They simply protect balance. And maybe the real question is this: why can't we be as clear as our cells? December 22nd made me think this: our bodies might be the best functioning version of the justice we fail to build. And maybe humanity is not so troubled because it is more complex than its cells, but because it has drifted away from them. In the evening, as I do every day, I opened my history notebook. On the page for December 22nd, there was this sentence: December 22nd, 1917. The Federal Reserve Act was passed in the United States. I paused for a moment, because there was a clearer connection than I expected between this date and the cells I had been thinking about earlier that day. The Federal Reserve is usually described, on paper, as a regulation, money supply, stability, crisis management. But at its core, what was done was this: the centralization of energy flow. Cells don't work that way. A cell does not gather all its energy into a single core. ATP production is distributed. There is circulation. There is balance. Humans do the opposite. They gather energy money into a center and then call that trust. But at the cellular level, we already know this. When energy accumulates excessively in one place, that place is not healthy. It either rots or explodes or disrupts the system from within. The cellular state I imagined earlier would not allow such centralization, because cells know this. To survive, everyone needs at least some access. This is why viruses are dangerous. They enter the system, but contribute nothing. They only replicate. Tumors are the same. Excessive growth is not freedom. It is the denial of balance. Humanity, however, still confuses these things. It mistakes growth for progress, central power for order, and calls obedient cells successful. Yet the body teaches us a different lesson every day. Life survives not through centralization, but through distribution. In the margin of my notebook, I wrote, "The more centralized a system is, the more fragile it becomes." And now I want to ask you this. If our body were a state today, would we be its healthy cells or a tumor growing without realizing it?